13th, 2018. Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Secretary, would you do the roll, please?
Chairman Frank Fox.
Present.
Vice Chairman Larry Petty.
Present.
Secretary David Gregory. Present. Mr. Keith Bell.
Here.
Mr. Lee Smith. Mr. Brent Oakridge.
Here.
Mrs. Deborah Wade.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right. Item number 4, this is free time for any of you to express or to divulge any ex parte communication. That is, if you've had any communication relative to any item on this agenda that should be disclosed, now's your opportunity, please.
I spoke with Mr. Wilkerson out in the parking lot about the softball.
Like I said, does anybody have any disclosure relative to any item on the agenda?
I say no for me.
All right. You want to do, have you talked to anybody about anything on this agenda?
No, sir.
All right. Let the record show negative comments on ex parte communication. All right, I hope all of you have had an opportunity to look at February 13 minutes. If you were here and have read the minutes or looked at them or reviewed them and consider them correct, would somebody please make a motion?
I make a motion.
Ms. Deborah Wade has made a motion.
I think I have a correction. I think Mr. Aldridge was here at the last minute.
No.
Was he not?
No.
Yeah, it was late.
He was late.
I was
That's
late.
right, that's right, he came in late.
He was late. He was late and me was late.
Yeah, we're both late.
Item 5A has them noted as arriving.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Wade has made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Who said that?
I did.
Thank you, Brent. Mr. Brent Aldridge is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. All right, those who were present last week voted in favor of accepting the minutes. We appreciate the presence of all of you being here, those of you who are sitting out in the chairs, and this time is for you, 3 minutes per speaker for items on the agenda. If you have something that you must share with us at this time, feel free to speak. Announce your name and this big guy's going to watch the clock. Anybody?
Mr. Chairman Fox, we'll have some folks here in the audience that will more than likely participate or be available for questions once we move through some of the agenda items. They'll be sharing their thoughts at that time, I believe.
Okay, all right. Let the record show there were no public comments at this time. Action item number 7, or item 7, action items A, 1201, 1205, and 1213, Louisville Highway, Crouch Minor Subdivision, plat, replat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you didn't bring your granny glasses, I have larger copies for you.
Thank you, I'm glad you did that. I need it. We turn the floor to Mr. Barr, he's going to draw the picture.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a pretty straightforward plat revision, if you will, or replat. The property owner of both of the parcels here on Louisville Highway, just to the south of us, has requested to realign one of the shared property lines. This won't affect any of the minimal dimensional standards for the zoning. It really doesn't affect anything other than it shifts a shared property line around, increasing one parcel's acreage and decreasing the others. I have no objection to this, and I recommend your approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I got one question.
Yes, sir.
It's just gonna move it to the easement right there, the 20-foot easement.
No, actually, it moves it in the other direction. It moves it to the south.
Were you taking out the
So
old parcel?
you'll see the dashed line that says old parcel line to be abandoned by this plat, and then you'll see a new line to the south of that with a call of north 64 west north 64 and west with 183 feet. That will be the new property line, so it actually shifts to the south. So it increases the parcel, I believe, I think just over half an acre.
1.76.
What's he making, two parcels into one?
No, sir, no.
What's he doing right here?
He's fixing it so that if he sells this property, they have to keep the right-of-way mowed. That's about all it amounts to.
Okay.
Pretty much. It's just making the commercial parcel slightly larger,
We're doing it right here.
and less irregular.
He's on this
In the
part.
floodway, keep the grass.
You talking about
I got you, thank you very much.
this? Yeah, keeping it with this.
Yeah.
This is the line he's moving to here.
Any other discussion?
Yes.
Any other
Add
questions?
that area. Yeah. Yes. And really, in reality, there's not much development opportunity to this. He's literally just increasing the acreage of the commercial parcel.
It's on the creek bank.
Too much, you're gonna flood.
No other discussion, can I entertain a motion?
I make a motion that we approve action item 7A, 1201 and 1205 and 1213, Louisville Highway, Crouch Minor Subdivision Plat, replat.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bell, second. Any other discussion? All right, no discussion. All in favor, let it be, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Let the record show it passed by unanimous vote. Item B, 7560, 7578 Southwest Road, Stubblefield Minor Subdivision plat, replat for utility easement. Mr. Ball.
Yes, sir. This is mostly just an administrative exercise on this. The utility easement was missed in the original minor subdivision plat before I started with the city. The developer installed a 4-inch sanitary force main along the fronts of these 4 parcels, and we never had a dedication for that utility easement. So with this, we are documenting that 15-foot utility easement for the sanitary line, as well as the developer has corrected the minimum front setback that was placed on the original plat. This 25 feet does comply with the residential 5 zoning. So another cleanup on that, but I'm considering this administrative housekeeping and recommend my approval.
I'd like to hear a motion at this time.
Make a motion that we approve the minor subdivision replat of the 4 parcels for a 15-foot utility easement on the land known as 7560, 7562, 7566, and 7578 South Swift Road.
Second the motion.
Thank you. We have a second from Mr. Gregory. Now, are there any discussion before we vote by anybody? Question, comment, snide remark, cruel joke?
No.
Anybody? All right. We're ready for question. We'd entertain a motion, please. I'm sorry. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the record show it passed by unanimous vote. Item Item 7C, South Williams Road, Bethel Farms, Phase 1, minor subdivision plat.
I'm going to pass those around here so you
Mr.
can
Paul.
zoom in a little bit better on what we have with the 11 by 17. Your way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any fish in it?
This is associated with the next item, but as part of an agreement with the developer, the city is recognizing that the developer owners can perform a minor subdivision plat that will create an initial 3 parcels on the overall 18-acre project. They have their justifications for that. It's my understanding, not that it's relevant, is that it's for cash flow purposes for the rest of the subdivision. But this is not out of the ordinary, and in fact, this minor subdivision plat request follows our subdivision regulations, including those addressing phase developments. So based on that, there are a couple of details that you'll find in the background of my staff report that addresses, I believe, the zoning, as well as the developer will be installing the utilities. I believe the utilities will be installed to serve the overall subdivision. Those utilities will serve the first 3 lots. That should provide adequate service, but once those first 3 lots are built and constructed, then I expect to move into the final platting for the rest of the subdivision. There's nothing terribly complicated about this. Other than that, some of the utilities tie to the master subdivision, which we'll be hearing next. But this isn't out of the ordinary to carve off the first phase of lots for the development in this manner. I'm recommending approval of the minor subdivision plat for these first 4 lots. So the 3 developable lots and the master parcel.
I move that we approve the minor subdivision plat for phase 1 of the proposed Bethel Farm subdivision located on South Williams Road.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Aldridge, second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I have some discussion.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
This is the beginning of the next line item that we have, which would be of one minor subdivision. The reason I asked for a question is on the subregs. I just want to get an understanding of the subregs on this. There's 4 of them, but the 3rd and 4th got my attention. It says no internal off-site sidewalks and no fire hydrants in the subdivision. Now, if we approve this, how would that affect the second line item that involves the remaining? It would be different, but the distilled ground is going to be the same. That's what I'm asking. If we vote this with the line item as they read, will that concur on the next vote of the next line item, which includes more homes?
In consultation, well, let me back up. The city doesn't have requirements for sidewalk improvements for minor subdivisions.
Okay.
That being said, and in this case, frankly, there isn't any connectivity. It is not uncommon. In fact, I don't think you all have approved a minor subdivision plat since I've been here with the city that's required sidewalks.
Okay.
Now, we may look at that if there was connectivity and this was, say, bridging a gap in between sidewalks in different parts of the city, but we really don't have much in the way of sidewalk infrastructure in the city. But in this case, again, minor subdivision plats generally don't require the sidewalks. Regarding the fire, in consultation with the fire chief, who's also present tonight, there is not a substantial concern for fire prevention on 4 lots. While this is essentially creating 3 buildable lots, of course, the remaining master or parent parcel is also buildable under the R5. So theoretically, there could be 4 homes constructed out here, and it's my understanding that the fire chief doesn't have any objections to 4 additional homes that don't have fire protection.
Maybe I was just wondering why the subregs and the sections were in here for this particular.
Those are for the next item to discuss, the preliminary plat for the rest of the subdivision.
Okay, gotcha, thank you. Okay, I see it now, thank you.
And these 4, you're saying these 4, according to our fire chief, doesn't meet the criteria for fire hydrants?
We're not on this item just yet, Mr. Petty.
I got ahead of myself, Mr. Petty, I'm sorry.
We're on 7C. We're on the minor subdivision plat, the prior
Okay,
item.
all right.
The next one's a preliminary.
Okay.
So you're talking about C.
Yes, sir. This is the first phase
All right.
of the overall
So we're
subdivision.
good.
Okay.
We're
All right.
next.
We have a motion and a second on item C.
Or B.
By Mr. Bell, Mr. Aldridge. I'd like to call for all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Let the record show it passed by one.
Now we're on.
All right, Mr. Chairman, this item.
You got
will
anything to
be-
pass out?
I do. Thank you for reminding me.
You got to pass the legal thing.
40-something.
53.
53.
All right, next item on the agenda is the item D, South Williams Road, Bethel Farms preliminary plat.
All right, Mr. Chairman, if you'll allow me, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on a narrative here with you all so that you have a better understanding. The owners of this property, as I mentioned earlier, are proposing to plat the 18 and a half acres. We've already accomplished the first phase, the first 4 lots, the 3 buildable and the remaining master. That will be moving forward with signatures and recordings when the applicants are able to obtain those. This has a little bit of history to it. It's currently zoned residential 5. That was, the parcel was rezoned in 2005, and the project sat dormant until, I believe, 2014, when the developers began, actually, I think it was conveyed to new parties, and they began investigating developing the 18 acres. We ran into some challenges and hurdles early on with identifying some of the previous approvals as well as even the zoning. But we were able to, with their patience, and we appreciate their patience, we're able to work out some of those bugs and some of the confusion out there. But that being said, this is actually the first major subdivision, to my knowledge, that's come into the city in several years, perhaps going back as far as 5, 8, or 10 years. This is, and we welcome these, don't misunderstand. But we also have the obligations and the requirements within our subdivision regulations and other ordinances to follow on the minimum standards for this subdivision. Some of those requirements include some off-site improvements, and I wanted to bring those to your attention. First off, there'll be some roadway improvements to South Williams Road to accommodate the additional traffic that's generated by this subdivision. There'll also be some improvements on the connection to Bethel Road that'll require a permit from our friends at TDOT. We'll have a sanitary sewer line extension from Bethel Road coming up South Williams into the subdivision, which will also service the first 3 lots. Then there will also be water service requirements, not only leading to the site from Bethel Road, but also White House Utility Districts doesn't have adequate supply in the ground today to provide services for them. White House Utility Districts is requiring an upsizing from a 2-inch line to a 6-inch line on South Mount Pleasant Road from Osborne down to Swift Road. It's about 2,000 or 2,500 linear feet. It's a really complicated upsizing and installation. White House Utility Districts has some pretty intensive requirements for their infrastructure, and the developers are working through that right now. That being said, currently, both the preliminary plat and the construction plans are under their second review. They were submitted, the first pass was submitted to us, I believe, January 29th. We had a resubmittal back in mid-February. Our engineers and surveyors are wrapping up their secondary review. I don't anticipate any issues with the plat document other than some cleanup of some titles and whatnot. The construction plans appear to be pretty close to being approved, which is one of the reasons why I'm asking for a conditional approval of the preliminary plat tonight based on our ongoing review on this. Just to give you a little bit of background, in 2005, when the property was rezoned to residential 5, a sketch plat was also submitted at that time for approval. And the Planning Commission in 2005 approved the sketch plat along with granting some variances or exceptions to some of the minimum standards that were on our books at the time and continue to be on our books right now. However, in our code, there was only a shelf life of those approvals of a year. Actually in 2016, when the developers brought the project back to us and we began hashing through the process and beginning to get all of our ducks in a row, we sat down and took a lot of time to go through what was approved in 2005 and document that. That document is also attached as the Memorandum of Understanding, and it lays out what we were able to best ascertain from the meeting minutes and other notes, and also interviews with some of the folks that were on the board or were present at that time, of what the Planning Commission approved in 2005. What the developers are asking now is that the same or similar variances that were granted in '05 also be approved today. And this comes down to you all having to make these decisions, and I've essentially laid out 4 requests for variances for you. And I've referenced our subdivision regulations and where that is. I also have printouts in here if anybody wants a copy to take a look at. But essentially, the developers are looking to reduce the roadway widths on South Williams Road. They're also looking to not have any roadway stripes or striping on the roads. Additionally, they're requesting no sidewalks, either on-site, within the project internally, or off-site. And they're also asking for no fire hydrants to be installed on the project. So I'll go quickly through each of the 4 items, and at this point, it's at your discretion, Mr. Chairman, if you want to ask questions of the developers, or if you'd like to hear their thoughts and comments as we go through this, we certainly can. I think it's important that we hear from them. But beginning with the reduced roadway widths, I am agreeing with their request on the reduced roadway widths, particularly on South Williams, because we don't anticipate any increased development further up the road. It is mostly a rural road as now. These The minimum standards in our code would require the roadway lanes to be 22 feet. So 11 and 11, or in the case of the three-lane intersection, 33 feet. It's my opinion and our engineer's opinion that that's an unnecessary dimension. It's larger than really what's needed, because we don't anticipate much more traffic on this road other than these 53 units that are being generated. So my recommendation is that this commission also recognize those variances from '05 and grant them in this case. The roadway striping, while we have minimum street standards on the construction, we don't have any, really in any of the other subdivisions within the city do we have striping. These are minor roads. It's my opinion that it's unnecessary within a subdivision, particularly when you have the reduced speeds. You don't need to designate the lanes necessarily. You don't have to have no passing zones, etc. Although they will be striping for the 3 lanes at the intersection with Bethel Road. So you will have that delineation to show where the lanes are to control the traffic, but elsewhere I don't think it's necessary, and I hope you'll accept my recommendation on that. Regarding the sidewalks, I'm torn on the sidewalks. They were approved by the Planning Commission in 2005 to not require sidewalks. To my knowledge, no other subdivisions in the city has sidewalks. Our minimum standards, however, that were in place before 2005 in this residential zone type of subdivision is for a minimum of 5-foot sidewalks on both sides of the road. I can't speak to why in 2005 the Planning Commission gave that waiver, but we don't have any others within the city. Y'all need to make a decision as to whether that's something that we want to begin requiring on subdivisions, or perhaps we'll have that conversation on the next submittal. But I'm going to leave that at your discretion. I'm torn on which way to lean on that, so I'm going to have to give you a neutral position, that it will be at your discretion. And then the fourth item being fire hydrants. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to bring the applicants up to speed until just this afternoon that White House Utility District has set some requirements that we weren't aware of prior. It was our understanding that fire hydrants would be installed, they just wouldn't be active at this time. The pipe will be in the ground for the fire hydrants, but White House Utility District was adamant that no fire hydrants be placed above ground if there is not available water in the subdivision. Now, even though the developers are upsizing the service lines to reach the subdivision, there's not enough water in the pipe for fire suppression and fire prevention. And our fire chief is here. He can answer questions for you all. He has some concerns with homes, 53 of them, that are built this close to one another on approximately 10,000 square foot lots, that he may be challenged if there is a fire of responding adequately and putting out the fire. I've counseled with our attorney on this, and I'm a little vague about how the procedure would go for the Planning Commission to waive or grant a variance for something that is public health, welfare, and safety oriented. And I'll defer to Mr. Wheeler to lend his opinion in that. Even if like I said, once they upsize the water to provide domestic tap service, there's not enough water, like I said, for the fire hydrants. Frankly, it's unlikely there's enough water for even sprinklers in the residences. Now, the setbacks, the side setbacks are somewhat of a concern with the residential 5. These houses could be placed as close as 12 feet wall to wall, and with your eaves, it would be possibly even closer. Say you have a 12-inch eave, we're looking at 22-foot separations. That's the fire chief's concern. I don't know honestly how to proceed with this matter. So that's why I need to defer to both our fire chief and our attorney for guidance on giving you all direction on how to move forward on those variances. Yes, sir.
Is it the developer's intent to put the fire suppression lines into the ground, but just not the fire hydrants above ground at this time?
Yes, sir. The minimum installation is a 6-inch looped or an 8-inch single stub, and I believe that's what they provided on their plans, and in fact, they could even place the T's and valves for those fire hydrants for future installation. Another question that arose in the discussion with White House Utility District was, say down the road in 3, 4, 5, 10 years that water is available, who's responsible for installing those fire hydrants? White House Utility District was adamant that they hold no responsibility for that it is a matter between the city and the developer. Frankly, we don't have a mechanism in place to bond or any other kind of surety or escrow fire hydrants in perpetuity when or if they may ever have enough water to supply them.
But as far as the developers are concerned, the lines will be there, the T's will be there, and what's holding it back, the fire suppression, is White House Utility?
Is adequate water, yes.
So
Yes.
it's not the developers that is holding it back?
It is not the developers holding them back. However, within our subdivision regulations, it states that it's the developer's responsibility to connect to water for those adequate, to obtain adequate water for domestic use and fire protection.
So if we decide not to, I guess what I'm saying is if we decide that fire suppression is necessary, they can't go forward at all.
Not affordably.
How would they do it otherwise?
I'll defer to our fire chief to lend his opinion on that.
What I read in here was that the White House was not allowing for sprinkler systems in the...
They don't believe they have enough, they don't believe they have adequate water for 53 units of sprinklers.
So even if they wanted to put sprinklers into the homes, the 53 homes,
It's unlikely.
it's unlikely. White House Utility, once again, is saying it can't be done at this time. Is that what's happening?
Yes.
Okay.
What would it take for White House Utility to have enough water up there for, what would they have to?
Several $1 million. That entire region of Robertson and Sumner County is woefully undersupplied. And as you all know, the West Bethel Industrial Park area around the racetrack, the only reason why that has not developed is because there is inadequate water for fire suppression. The solution there, and we're running through the process of a needs analysis to prepare a report to request funding or grants or any kind of assistance to upsize the water and possibly build a water tower or two. But the bottom line is it's about $7.5 million. Obviously, the city doesn't have that. White House Utility District isn't interested in fronting those kinds of improvements at this time. So we're caught between a rock and a hard place here.
So in other words, the developers in this particular instance have attempted to meet each and every requirement that this city requires as far as water and fire suppression.
That would, I think, is an accurate statement, yes.
And it's White House Utility that's saying,
We don't have the water in the pipe, even when you upsize a portion of the pipe.
okay, and they are expending the cost of upsizing it to 6 inches?
The 2,500 linear feet, yes, and then I believe it's to the tune of $150,000 to $200,000 by the time they make the installation, or the design, the installation. They're also going to have to require additional easement because White House Utility District doesn't want to locate their their pipe in a public right-of-way. They want an exclusive standalone private easement that will have to be attained from private property owners along South Mount Pleasant Road.
So is the city of Millersville and the developers being held hostage by White House Utility?
I'd rather not answer that question.
As usual.
Well,
As
Mr.
usual.
Bell, I'll interject here, and since you brought it up, yes, we are being held hostage. And I'm looking at the developers when I say we. Now, I'm sorry, Mr. Barr, that I understand why
Mr.
you
Chairman, you are
hesitant
fully
to say
within your
anything,
rights.
but, yes, that's it. Now, thank you a lot for that question. We've got the plat before us, we understand what we've had thing here. I would like to, as we need to do, we need to entertain a motion. I have a question. Can we get a motion in a second and then discuss it?
Go ahead.
All right. Can we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that we approve item 7D, which is the preliminary plan of the proposed Bethel Farm subdivision located on South Williams Road, Robertson County map 125, parcel 165.01.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, point not point of order, I can't make a point of order, but I would like to request that the approval be conditional upon our surveyor finalizing the review of the preliminary plat. There are a few details still to get cleaned up on it, but I agreed with the developer, we bring it forward and fast-track this, which, please don't laugh, I apologize for that term, but we're trying to speed this along as timely as we can, considering where we are now. And I believe we can probably have the document wrapped up, because according to state statute, even though our codes say otherwise, this preliminary plat has a shelf life of 3 years from its approval, and I would like to make sure that it's right before it begins. So as long as you agree that once we have our surveyor and engineers complete their review and whatever revisions need to be made to satisfy them, then we'll go ahead and make that effective.
I withdraw my previous motion. I move that we approve the preliminary plat of the proposed Bethel Farm subdivision located on South Williams Road, Robertson County map 125, parcel 165.01, conditioned upon the final approval of our surveyor.
Thank you.
I think it needs to be a little more strict than that, because we hadn't even answered these other questions yet.
Well, we haven't had our discussion yet.
Waiting on discussion.
All right.
Well, and you may need to,
I know there's
Certainly.
some rushing going on, but we
you may want to address
You have
each
to have
of these
you have to have a
individuals.
motion and a second before
Yeah.
you
For
the
can
record.
discuss it.
Well,
Okay.
no, I know what I'm going to do.
Okay.
All right, gentlemen, this is, we've got it laid out pretty good, and appreciate Mr. Bell's question. And Mr. Head, thank you for being here. First of all, let's keep this as orderly as possible. We'll go around the table, start with Mr.
well, he's made a motion, it ain't been seconded.
It ain't been seconded.
I'll second it. Brent seconded it.
He's second the
Brent, I'm
first,
sorry. Yeah.
and the second.
All right. Brent, Brent seconded. We got it. Okay. Now we've got a motion and a second. Let's have some discussion, and let's keep it. Mr. Lee, you get
Okay.
you get the floor.
Starting with the reduced road lane widths. You say you don't anticipate any more development down there. Big farm. Well, this was too at one time.
Yes, sir.
I'm living on a road now that you've made commercial property on the front side, and the road's not big as a driveway. So if we grant this, we're gonna have to face this later on, if anything gets developed later.
I'm glad you brought that up, because here is my opinion and concept of how to move forward on something like that. I believe in pro rata sharing. That's based on my background as a development manager, that say that next subdivision comes in, which may not happen, at that point, we could require the next developer to further upsize that road at his expense. I'm trying to be fair to this developer that he doesn't need a full-blown roadway out there. Say you get another subdivision that's further up the road, they can upsize that road further. They can expand it, widen it to accommodate their traffic as well.
You would think though that this developer would widen that road up to his point. The next one would widen it to his point. Is a more fair way of doing it. Now, I'm not trying to restrict it. I think it should be great for the city, believe me. But it's like we're throwing out everything. Now, as far as the striping, I'm glad they're not gonna stripe them. I think it's ugly.
Could we get striping on Pole Hill Road?
If you want it,
Can we get striping on Williamson Road?
I can go do it if you want to. We'll just get some spray paint. That's about the way the county does.
I'm out on that.
So that's a question I got.
Well-
Okay? It's not a deal killer, but I'm bringing it up, you know. It's like we're passing it down because you don't anticipate anymore.
I don't at this time, but even if that further development does appear,
Stick
I
it
don't,
to them.
well, I wouldn't say stick it to them.
Sounds
They're-
like it.
Well, let me back up. Right now, we're dealing with a road that's barely 12 to 14 feet wide for a two-lane road that is used right now by the existing property owners. Frankly, any improvement on that roadway is an improvement for the safety of the public. I don't think it's unreasonable to ease our way into upsizing that road. Here's one issue that will come up that I didn't mention, is some of the property owners along there have some pretty mature trees that are technically within the right-of-way. If we go to widen that road today, or require the widening of that road, we're gonna have some really unhappy folks out there that they're taking down the trees that have been there for decades. We're trying to avoid that. We're trying to be sensitive to the neighbors right now. By upsizing the roadways, then we risk that. Not only by having a wider asphalt section, but then more drainage, deeper, wider ditches. We're trying to be sensitive to the residents that are out there today.
So what are we looking at widening the roads? 22 foot from 12 to 22 foot, is that what you said on South Williams?
40.
Well,
Says 40.
the right-of-way overall is identified today as 40 feet. That's according to Robertson County's road maintenance resolutions. They'll be adding additional width to the right-of-way with their subdivision plat. What we're looking as far as asphalt goes, today we have, like I said, 12 to 14 feet, which actually narrows even further as you get further north on that road. At the intersection with Bethel Road, we're looking at 3 10-foot lanes. Now, because Williams would technically qualify as a collector road, they really should be 11-foot lanes. I don't think you need 11-foot lanes to service a residential subdivision. And frankly, the other residents that are up there right now that are using essentially a 6 and 6 or 7 and 7 foot roadway. It seems to accommodate the residents that are there now, and 10 feet, I think, is adequate. As far as our emergency response equipment, 10 feet seems to be acceptable.
If there's a hydrant, it's 26 feet, it's the minimum requirements for fire department access roads,
Overall,
overall with 26
Yes.
feet, shoulder to shoulder.
yes.
And we don't even have that now.
We don't, but
And we're gonna add this.
And 103 cars to it, 106 cars.
per day or twice a day or
Well,
whatever it
what's
may
gonna be
so.
right here is 106 cars. You know, every house in there is gonna have at least 2 vehicles.
And they're not all leaving and coming at the same time.
Getting back
And there'll be
to
enough room for stacking in the 3 lanes.
how much asphalt will we have on the most northerly entrance to the subdivision? What would be the asphalt width at that point?
18 feet is what I'm recommending.
Okay, so it'll be an increase of 6 feet, anywhere between 6 and 8 feet of what it
Yes.
currently is right now.
Yes,
Okay, so it is expanding it.
absolutely.
Okay. And you're saying that we need 26 feet total for any type of fire suppression?
Well, that's the standard if you want to go by the IFC.
Okay, and right
For fire
now-
department access
Yeah.
road, it's 26 feet.
As Mr. Smith just pointed out, You don't have enough access as it currently exists.
I mean, we can get down there if we have to.
Yeah, I
But if we're making
realize that.
improvements, then
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
at least meet the minimum standard.
And that may be the fire standards, but we also have our subdivision regulation standards, which go 20, 22, and 24, depending upon the class of the road. So really, the widest road that our sub-regs can require is 24 feet for 2 lanes, so 12 and 12.
Which would be sufficient.
I'm not done.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was just the first.
You just took a breath, didn't you?
Yeah, no striping on internal. Sidewalks, I know it's a big expense, 5 foot on each side of the road, it's taking a lot of landscape from each lot, a lot of expense.
Actually, if I could correct you there, the sidewalks would be located within the right-of-way, within the 50-foot right-of-way. They technically would not be on the property, although it would be the owner's, generally, it's the owner's responsibility to maintain their yard to the edge of asphalt. They're often, the expectation is that they maintain their grass to the roadway, including the right-of-way, which is not their property.
Right. But nevertheless, expense,
It is an expense, yes.
concrete over dirt.
Yes.
But you'll never have sidewalks if you don't start somewhere. And you're talking about building them down here, but they're not gonna connect to anything either.
Well, they will actually here on.
These might also.
Eventually they may.
One day if this
Yes, eventually it may.
develops. The fire thing really bothers me. I don't know on that. It's like
What'd you say, the what?
the fire.
Okay.
Fire hydrants and the suppression and have a home fire up there and it's 15, 20 homes burned. And I don't know about that. That's something legal right there that needs to be discussed.
I think it would be less risk than what we find in North Point. North Point only has a 5-foot side setback for each of their lots, and some of their homes, the eaves are less than 10 feet apart.
But we can't do nothing about that.
That is correct.
This hadn't started.
Yes, sir.
But
I don't want to make the same mistake twice.
Let me interject.
Sure.
Where's the hydrant at North Point?
There's pros and cons. There's hydrants all over North Point.
Where? How many?
On the main drag, there's one on each cul-de-sac on each side because each road's T.
Are you listening?
There's adequate hydrants. You're within at least 500 to, I mean,
So you
I
got
don't
a
know the exact
China,
measurements, but you've got enough where we can drop line and
you got a
lay,
Chinaman's chance of preventing the
To lay
second
to
house and third house from
protect
burning.
exposure. Absolutely.
See,
But none
now,
here.
where's the now, since I'm interrupting,
Go ahead.
where's the closest hydrant now to this proposed subdivision?
South Williams, let's see, from South Williams, the closest hydrant would be Love Properties. And it's right at exactly a mile, the corner of Woodruff and Lake Road.
That's
The
back to
easiest,
the
most
interstate.
accessible hydrant.
In class 6, you gotta be within 1,000 feet of a hydrant, right?
In our
Class
code,
In our subdivision, actually in chapter 4,
500. In
fire
Article
hydrant,
4.
it's 500, every 500 feet within 1,000 feet of a dwelling or structure. Placement's every 500 feet.
Have you ever checked that hydrant down on Love?
We just, and I'm glad you
Will
brought
it
that
flow?
up. Today, we wanted to do a dry run, just to figure out with our water supply, our tanker, how long would it take to dump a load of water on South Williams and drive to the nearest hydrant? So we ran that today. That hydrant's a red top, and it's flowing under 500 gallons per minute.
So you'd suck it dry in New York?
Well, you couldn't pump off of it, you can fill off of it, because we did. We dumped a load of water, we ran, it took us 11 minutes and 20 seconds to go from South Williams down to Love Properties, fill that tanker up, which is 1,800 gallons, back from Love Properties to South Williams. So it takes 11 minutes and 20 seconds for one operator, which that's what we run, to run that tanker from South Williams to Love Properties.
What is the average elsewhere when you've done that?
It varies. I mean, it'd be hard to. And that was perfect weather conditions, we weren't running lights and sirens.
Well,
But that's,
1,800 gallons, how much would that
well, I went ahead and figured out.
possibly put out?
So typically on a residential fire, we're gonna pull 2 lines. We run 1 3/4 hose lines, and they'll average 125 gallons per minute. So let's say hypothetically, our tanker and the engine from Station 2 on Bethel Road both responded at the same time to that fire. The 1,800 gallons of water on the tanker, 1,000 gallons on the engine, 2 lines will give us 11 minutes of firefighting. 11 minutes. So even if we drop the tanks on the ground, fill them up, that engine's got 11 minutes worth of water. So this was perfect driving conditions to there at under 500 gallons per minute on that hydrant.
It's always dark and raining.
It's always dark and raining or freezing, because I can't tell you how many times we froze that parking lot up at Love Properties. Our last fire we had on Bethel Road in the S-curves, we had ice from the fire all the way to Love Properties. So, an ideal day, and that's just to South Williams, that's not going into a neighborhood and navigating the roads and wherever your dump site's set up at. But it was exactly, it was 11 minutes, let's see what it says. They give you 11 minutes and 20 seconds of fire water. Just give you an idea. And that's if both trucks roll at the same time. And typically on a house fire, your engine's the first to roll. So we're a volunteer department. We got pay-per-call guys that come out. The only 2 full-timers during the day, and we're here. So every minute you go by, that fire's growing. So if we get there and it's a big fire, the next thing we got to worry about is exposures, because now we're closer. The houses are closer instead of it being large rural lots. They're 10,000 square foot homes.
You got mutual aid with Ridgetop?
We do not have any kind of mutual aid agreement. We've requested them, but that's it. If it's a confirmed fire, we'll request, but who's to say they're not out on another run? We can't count those, because you don't know if they're coming or not. They're a volunteer department as well.
Thank you for that information, that's good.
One more thing.
Go ahead.
The roads on the original from 8 or 9 years ago were 50 foot inside the subdivision, now they're gonna be 30. Is that correct?
I don't believe so. The right-of-way will remain at the 50 feet minimum. That I don't believe has changed. There was a change from the sketch plat in '05 of the asphalt widths. There was a request at that time for reduced roadway widths of 18 on the 2 spur roads, and then what's now Camden to be, it was agreed that they would provide 24 feet there, which is actually 4 feet larger or wider than our minimum standard. And I'm glad you brought that point up, Mr. Smith, because that is a factor I think you need to consider in this discussion is North Point is a good example of where it's real challenging to get fire apparatus and other equipment through those streets there when people are parked on street. Even though we have code ordinance that prohibits on-street parking, it's not something that we actively enforce out there unless we get complaints or if there is some occurrence that requires our attention. Having the 24-foot wide roads as they're now providing makes access easier, even if you have on-street parking, even on both sides, to get the emergency equipment in there. There was discussion, I believe, in 2005 about increasing the road widths in lieu of the sidewalks, but I have not been able to get any detailed information on what that conversation was. But that was part of the variance to not requiring sidewalks was wider roads. So there was some bargaining going on in 2005. Honestly, I think in 2018, there can be some bargaining here as well.
But in 2005, whatever was bargained is null and void at this point, correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, wait a minute, let's back up a minute. We have a memorandum of understanding here that's signed in December of '16 that recites everything that appears to have agreed upon in 2005. I have a concern there. I have a legal concern there. I guess the city attorney can answer that. But I
Vote on that?
have a signature with the city manager's signature on it.
Frank, were you on that board then?
Who said that?
I did. I asked.
No, Mayor, I wasn't on that board in '05, was I? Me and the mayor was on the outs at that time.
Like December 5th to 16th.
Was you on the board, was it ever voted on?
December
By
5th to
by this
16th,
board?
somebody signed it from the city.
That letter?
City manager.
That letter that the city manager signed?
No.
Planning Commission.
Oh, well, then
was
she would, no, then that's not, that's void. Isn't that void, sir?
Not if it's
Mr. Rob?
been, in my opinion, if it's been ratified a second time, it's questionable.
Who ratified?
Karen,
I know.
city manager.
But you get into some complicated issues with regard to actual, apparent, or implied authority as to whether or not she can bind the city to that. Was that ever voted on by the city commission?
No, not to my knowledge.
There's a question there that, and the law is clear on this, that if there's an attempt to hold the city to this agreement, the burden is on the developer to prove that she had either apparent or implied or actual authority to bind the city to this. And that's a heavy burden under most circumstances. An argument can be made that the city is not bound to that agreement legally. Whether or not there's other considerations that you take, that you want to indulge in as to what's fair or not fair or anything else, that's another matter. But initially, without the vote of the commission, I don't believe she was authorized to sign that. In fact, as a result of that, may not put you in a position where you're legally bound by it.
I don't think this has anything to do with the day anyway. This has to do with 2005, and the wording is 2005. It's not 2018. This wording has nothing to do with us today.
Well, the date that it was signed, that's reflected on that document, would be 16. And
But we're not held to this, even though it was signed in 16 by the city manager.
there's a real question about that as to whether or not you would be legally. I shared with Mr. Barr this afternoon a case out of Memphis, and it sounds different, but the issues are the same, where an employee was fired, and he sued, and they went to mediation, and the legal department down in Memphis had the authority, and they still do, to settle any case under $500. Anything over $500 had to have the mayor's approval. Well, they sent the city attorney to the mediation, and she agreed to settle the case for something over $5,000. And the employee relied upon that. He got to the mayor's office and he said, "I'm not approving this." And the employee was unsuccessful in holding the city liable for that settlement, based on the fact that the employee could not prove that she had the authority to bind the city under those circumstances.
Thank you, Counselor. Any more questions, Mr. Lee, Mr. Smith?
No, I'll shut up.
Mr. Secretary, do you have anything?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apologize for jumping ahead of this on what we was talking about earlier, but I want sidewalks in our subdivisions. It's an ordinance, I believe, was written in 2003, if I'm not wrong, that all of our subdivisions are supposed to have sidewalks. We have none. None of our subdivisions have sidewalks. We've got an ordinance here. And it's supposed to be a law that's supposed to be followed. We're not following it. We're not pushing. We're not standing behind the ordinance. We're either going to do it or not. So I'll publicly say this for the people on TV can see it as well. I've talked to the mayor. Being a city commissioner, I asked to bring this up to our next work session. We're either going to enforce this ordinance, or we're going to take it off the books. I'm going to see what the commissioners have to say about it. I'm not trying to make these guys suffer for anything, but to me, sidewalks add safety, they add beauty, add a decorative. It makes everything look nice to me. And I look for safety first in our city, all of our city. And that's why I wanted sidewalks going down through the middle of our city, because the children can walk to the community center, to the Hyatt for our grammar school, they can go to the library, and safely walk in our city. And I feel the same way with subdivisions. I really do. But I'm not going to try to make a sample out of them. I appreciate what y'all have done. I appreciate you going ahead and putting the infrastructure in for the hybrids. I appreciate that very much. But sometime or another, Commissioners, we're going to have to make a decision. And I'm not saying we have to do it tonight, but sometime or another, we're going to have to make a decision. Are we going to follow the ordinances of this city, or are we not? Or did we make the ordinances just for the heck of it? Those guys in 2003, a commissioner in 2003 made this ordinance, so let's forget about it now. Let's not pay no more attention to this. Let's drop all of our ordinances and do something else. That's what we're doing. We either make a stand or don't make a stand. So that's the only thing I have to say about it. I do appreciate them guys wanting to build up here and doing our city. I think they're doing our city a service. And I'm glad and I hope everything goes well with you in your development. But our job and our city commissioner's job is to see about our ordinances. And that's the only thing, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your time. Let me say
Thank you for expressing yourself, Mr. Bell.
Going back to Mr. Gregory, just one question. Our ordinance requires sidewalks on both sides of the road, is that correct?
I don't know, I think it is. I honestly think it is, but I'm not sure.
In residential districts, R4 and R5, they're required on both sides. Residential districts, R1, 2, and 3, one side, but it has to be 6 feet.
That's a good question, thank you. Appreciate it.
Would,
But they don't know
this
the other
is just
side.
something that the city commission is gonna have to bring, it's gonna be brought up in a work session.
I asked for it too. I asked the mayor if he could do that.
What's your thoughts on sidewalks on one side of the road? In a residential area, I'm talking.
Residential, that's another good question. Mr. Bale, I'd have to, honestly, looking at the plot of the ground as a plat, you could put one side on this, it would be okay, without tearing up, getting in too much of their ground, if they just done one side.
One side of the roadway,
Yes, sir, one side of the roadway, I don't know where would be a good spot, I see it's cul-de-sac, and I see a few other things here that they could follow with the sidewalk, like outside of that cul-de-sac, down back to the main road. It's something to get everybody off the road, that's the only thing I'm interested in pushing, but as commissioners, we can figure this out and let the people in the city know these things.
So if we have within this subdivision, we have a 50-foot right-of-way, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And 24 feet of it's going to be asphalt,
Yes, sir.
so we're going to have 26 feet, essentially, 13 feet on either side of the road?
Approximately,
From the
yes.
center line, or actually from the edge of the asphalt?
On the edge of pavement or curb, yes.
Okay, so if they were to put sidewalk on one side in a subdivision like that, I mean, and that doesn't interfere with fire protection, does it? The sidewalk, it actually adds to it.
Not necessarily. As long as we get the trucks through there.
On South Williamson Road, is that a 40-foot right-of-way or 50-foot?
South Williamson or South Williams?
South Williams, excuse me.
We're recognizing what the county recognized, being 40 feet
So we
today.
have So on a main artery, as Mr. Lee pointed out, Mr. Smith pointed out, we have a 40-foot right-of-way, but within the subdivision itself, we have a 50-foot right-of-way.
Yes, and along South Williams Road, where it does abut this new subdivision, they're adding additional right-of-way to that So, and I don't recall the
The
dimension.
developers are?
Yes, and which does follow our subdivision regs, that when you have that constrainment, that on their side, they split the difference onto their side. I don't remember what the exact figure is.
We're
but
gonna have
that-
asphalt on South Williams Road is gonna be, what, 22 foot wide, you said? It's 18 foot.
It'll transition from 30 at Bethel down from the 3 lanes to the 2 lanes into 18, so 9 and 9.
So we're gonna have 22 foot of right-of-way that's not being used.
You'll have more than 22 feet on South Williams Road.
And I guess White House Utility doesn't want to use that as their, to put their lines.
Actually, their lines are going on to the individual private lots as an exclusive easement, except where it crosses the roads.
So the private lots here are gonna have an additional easement other than the right-of-way easements?
Well, the right-of-way isn't an easement, but they will have a utility easement dedicated to White House.
I realize that.
But it generally is less than the minimum side yard setbacks anyway. So it's not a difficult dimension to add into, because they have to set back a minimum distance anyway.
Do you know what the rationale is for White House Utility, I mean, since they have?
Yes, I do, actually. They explained it to us. Their intent is to place their pipes once, and as long as they have an exclusive easement that they don't have to share with anybody else, number one, there's no conflict. They don't anticipate anybody hitting their lines unless they're crossing perpendicularly. And second, it secures their locations that if the roadway is ever widened or other public improvements are made, if they're in a public right-of-way, they are obligated to move their pipes. If they're in a private easement, they don't have to move their pipes.
Okay, so.
It's a one-time installation, and it should last in perpetuity, and they won't be required to relocate them.
The water lines for for lack of a better phrase, we're gonna call it dummy fire lines, because they're not operating.
No, those fire lines will also be supplying, the fire lines are the same as the domestic service lines.
So they're the same.
They're just upsized to support fire hydrants someday.
What is that upsize?
It's a 6-inch as opposed to a conventional 4.
Well, that's what they're putting in, that's what.
That's right.
White House, that they're putting in here anyway.
Yes.
I'm getting confused. We have, and it's not your fault, it's just my lack of understanding. We have a 6-inch line that's running down Bethel Road from South Pleasant Road, or whatever that is, now South Mount Pleasant. The developers are running a 6-inch line from that location down to South Williams Road, and then down South Williams Road, and then into that subdivision. Is that correct?
He's saying,
Actually, if I could refer your technical questions to the engineer. This is Corey Netterfield with Clover.
Yes, so they are extending the water line from down South Williams Road to the subdivision. It'll be an 8-inch line up to the beginning of the subdivision, and then from there, it'll be a 6-inch line that loops
Okay,
inside
so
the
we're
subdivision.
running, so you're gonna be, the proposal is you're running an 8-inch line from South Mount Pleasant,
Correct,
Is
to
it-
the beginning of the subdivision.
and then at the beginning of the subdivision, there's a 6-inch line
Correct,
into the subdivision.
correct.
And 6-inch lines are required for fire suppression?
That's the minimum.
As long as
line.
they're looped, yes.
That's the minimum size you can.
And why is it that we can't have fire suppression? Why
Because there's
White House
no-
approved it?
While the pipe is large enough, there's not enough water in that large pipe.
The off-site improvements
Volume.
would have to be
Can't get a
millions of dollars to allow
So, a
fire.
pumping station or something, or
Their whole system out there isn't adequate.
White House?
White Houses. They're already putting in a 2,500 linear foot off-site water line half a mile away in order just to get enough fire flow for the residential taps
For this,
for this subdivision. They're
who's
doing
paying,
it
who's paying
off-site.
for that?
They are paying for
The
it.
developers are paying for that too?
They're paying for it. They have to buy the easements. The White House Utility District doesn't pay for the easements. They have to buy the easements from the landowners. They have to install it. They have to pay White
We need
House's
to get
fees
into
for
the utility
inspection.
business.
Yes, it's a
No,
very
I-
lucrative business.
we ought to get into the utility business busted, is what we need to do.
But they have to do all of that in order to do that. And White House will not have any of their water lines inside the right-of-way, like Mr. Barr said. One, because it's if that road ever gets widened, they have to pay White House Utility District to relocate the line. So if that road one day gets widened to an 80-foot right-of-way, then they have to buy that easement from White House Utility District. They have to move their line for them and provide them a
Well,
new
the
easement.
governmental authority would have to buy it.
Yes, whoever's widening the road. But White House wouldn't have to do it. If it's in the right-of-way, then White House has to pay for all of that. They have to acquire the new easement, they have to relocate their line. So that's why they require it outside of the right-of-way. It's so that if it ever gets widened, they don't have any
What would be
easements.
required for fire suppression?
They said it would be a massive upgrade of their whole system out there. It's not just one line, it could be upsizing. There's a whole bunch of areas, the line that they're upsizing to provide water is like a 2-inch line. You know, they're upsizing it to, I think it's a 6 or an 8-inch line off-site.
Don't they sell, doesn't White House Utilities sell water to Sampson County, Kentucky?
I don't know
And
who
they
they
also-
sell it to or who they buy it from.
They sell it to Sampson County.
But they have to, there would be a lot of off-site water line improvements on various areas all over
Don't they sell it to Ridgetop?
that part of the county. White House Utility District services parts of Portland, parts of Robertson County,
Hendersonville, right.
Hendersonville. I mean, they spider web all over. But they are probably one of the most difficult because there are some areas of their system don't have very adequate flow. They need a lot of stuff out there. They have a,
Who's putting up that tank in Hendersonville, up there at Stop 30 Road? Is that
No,
White House, that's White House Utilities? That's my understanding, it's White House Utilities.
yeah, it could be. The problem is they have a whole bunch of lines throughout the county that are 2-inch, 3-inch lines that won't supply enough water for fire suppression. So all of those would have to be upgraded off-site in order to allow the pressure. And then they have to be able to allow, get the actual water there.
Isn't there an 8-inch line that runs, I guess, a little bit east or
There's an
west?
8-inch line that runs down,
West of South Williams Road, not far from South Williams Road?
yes, but I mean, you could have a 12-inch line out there, they just don't have the flow to,
But there's a line, 8-inch line, isn't there, that runs to Ridgetop, my understanding.
There's an 8-inch line that runs today from the tanks behind 31W on Cycle Lane, north underneath the interstate, down Ted Doris. It actually splits at Ted Doris and becomes a 12-inch line for several thousand feet, and then reduces back to an 8-inch line running west. And at some point, it splits into a 4-inch line on the other side of Bethel Road, and both of those lines run parallel out Bethel Road, and at some point, I think around the dog leg where the S turn, they drop the 4-inch line, and the 8-inch continues out to Ridgetop or Greenbrier, and then provides water that White House Utility District sells to them.
And then they sell water to Ridgetop and Greenbrier.
yes.
But we can't make White House do anything they don't want to do.
Nobody.
There's no sense in
Right,
kicking
check.
us down the road where they got a line, how big our line is.
Yeah, it'd be millions of dollars to upgrade their system to allow fire suppression out there. And they said it might be available at some point. but-
Mr. Chairman, would you like to look at that?
I get sick and want to throw up when I look at it.
Well, what is the legal stance if we were to approve this? And the line's in there, no fire hydrants, but it's available, but there's no water available. Where does the city go? And how does this affect the homeowner's insurance for these people?
The homeowner's insurance, that was one of the questions I had. I can't imagine what that bill would
Well,
be.
you see what I'm saying, that they could be faced when they get ready to sell, that
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know
Well,
what,
the question I have is, how does that affect the city's fire rating on the totality? Do you have any idea?
No, not really. I mean, we're currently a class 4 rating. We're not talking about a whole lot of rooftops out there. So to say it would affect it, I couldn't say if it would one way or the other. But lines in the ground that we can't access don't put out fires.
You're right.
they might as well not even be there.
I mean, they've got to be there, because that's your tap water. I mean, same thing, flush your toilets is going to.
I guess my
And the
concern
valves and all that.
is that the developers are meeting every contingency that's required of them.
That is
And
an
have been
accuracy,
working with the
yes.
city
Yes.
to get this done, but it's a third quasi-governmental entity that is
It's
refusing.
private.
No, it's not, it's quasi-government. It's not
They
right.
did.
It's always been quasi-government, it's statutory. That's the
Run
reason.
for Congress and get it changed.
But it's a quasi-governmental entity that has 3 commissioners. How they're elected, I'm not sure.
Cranger.
But,
No, the last night was trying.
Well, I mean, there's nothing we can do about them. There's other
there's
things
nothing
we
we
need
can
in
do
this
about it.
city.
So I guess the issue before us is, do we approve this or not, now that we have developers trying to develop that land up there since 2005 under the circumstances.
Let me
Not only the
respond to Mr. Smith.
Oh, 8 inch.
And you asked about, I think the first part of your question was
Black
about
is 2
liability
inch.
to the city. This is a discretionary decision
Wow.
on your part as a board, and it will be for the city commission. The Governmental Tort Liability Act immunizes city bodies from suits on a discretionary decision like this. Now, an everyday function of how you do this or do that in a regular workday is not discretionary. That's, you can incur liability on behalf of the city for that. And a lot of people don't understand it, but it's been there forever under the tort liability. What you're wrestling with now, you should be immune from suit, because otherwise you couldn't get anybody to sit on the board.
Well, I think I have most of my questions answered, and it appears to me that the developers have done everything they can do, and the city and this board is doing everything they can do. And so then the question becomes, is it good enough for us to approve this with the exception of the sidewalks?
That's another day.
I mean, and maybe you can talk him into doing sidewalks on one side of them. But, you know, we're not gonna grow unless we do something. And I understand Mr. Smith too, exactly what he's saying. I do have a concern. That's all my
Brent?
questions.
Anybody's asked, I don't have any questions.
Really? Ms.
Fire
Wade?
hydrants.
I don't have any,
Ms. Wade, you have the floor.
I don't have any.
No questions from Ms. Wade? Mr. Petty?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right.
You want to reduce, I'm asking you, gentlemen, you want to reduce the road lane width on South Williamson. Was there gonna be on y'all's property side or your subdivision side, in front of there on South Williamson, was there gonna be sidewalk? It wasn't? Okay. The sidewalks are just inside your potential sidewalks were just inside the lay of the land, right?
We were proposing for no sidewalks.
I know you want no sidewalks.
But the 2005, they had
Yeah,
called for the
that's what I'm
sidewalks.
saying, that according to our ordinance,
Well, our ordinance if I could clarify that, our ordinance includes not only internal sidewalks, but external sidewalks that may front existing roadways, and there's also provision for connecting to other surrounding or neighboring sidewalks within the area. Again, at the Planning Commission's discretion on that. There are no other sidewalks, to my knowledge, anywhere close for connectivity.
Well, you know, the question I have, and I apologize for going back to it, you know, in item 7C, we talked about, that we approved a little while ago, we talked about those 3 parcels, those are the only 3 parcels that will be fronting South Williams Road.
Yes.
And the sidewalks issue, all the rest of these parcels here, none of them will be fronting South Williams Road, is that correct?
That is correct. Well, they will be,
There may be
there'll be some of them abutting,
but they do not
correct.
front.
And there will not be any other driveways.
Their frontage will be on the roadways within
On the secondary
subdivision.
roads.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Where the right-of-way exists, within the 50-foot right-of-way.
Within the subdivision, yes, sir.
Because I was getting back to that 50-foot and the 18-foot of asphalt we have in there. What'd you say, 24-foot of asphalt?
Inside the subdivision internally, they're proposing 24, which again exceeds the minimum standard of 20.
So we have a 50-foot right-of-way, so we have 13 foot on either side of the asphalt for.
With the existing plan of 24 feet, yes.
Okay.
Now, there is also a standard that there should be at least a 4-foot separation between the roadway or curb and the sidewalk, so that you can locate utilities within that strip. The
But they're
planning
not gonna put
commission.
utilities
But
in.
well, it's all underground utilities, phone, cable,
Okay, so all this is
whatnot,
gonna be
electric.
underground utilities?
Yes, our code, that is a subdivision regulation that the 2005 Planning Commission did hold hard to, and we continue to hold hard, staff holds hard to it now, that those utilities need to be underground.
So all public utilities except for water will be on this public right-of-way and they'll be underground.
Well, water will be there too.
But it's not gonna be on this public right-of-way.
That is correct, yes.
Be on-
It'll
they're
be
all
on an
private.
easement on each individual lot, except where it crosses the right-of-way.
It just aggravates.
And my other question was, and you don't really want sidewalks, but you want to reduce the size of the road in there? Is that what you were asking to do? Or just to reduce the size of the road outside on South Williams?
Correct.
Okay.
Can I address that? And we're really not,
Get his name.
we, South Williams, I'm Todd Bowen here, and I'm the
Thank you.
surveyor on the project. South Williams Road will be widened, there's gonna be a 10-foot right-of-way dedication given on South Williams Road, and they will be widened. It just won't meet the specs that, it'll be 9 feet wide instead of 11 feet wide, the lanes. And there'll be 3 lanes entering at Bethel Road, like you said, there and there. So South Williams will be widened, but it will not be widened, we're asking it won't be widened to, the 11 feet each lane. And we are dedicating a 10-foot right-of-way on the left side, going down South Williams there for the right-of-way. And the reason is, like I said, there's a lot of mature trees that are in the right-of-way on the right side of the road there. And theoretically, they could go in there, cut those out and widen them, because it has been dedicated on a plat done by Mr. Kissinger. But, they don't want to try to start the development by making the neighbors mad. So, they're going to try to give 10 feet on their side and widen the roads out and go down through there like that.
But it still meets the fire code.
It'd be adequate, but if you go by minimum standards for access roads, you're 26 feet, shoulder to shoulder. I don't believe there's another street in this city that meets that.
Well, our code doesn't even.
Yeah, the subdivision regulations
It
don't
does not.
require that.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I look at 12 Stones, I don't know how wide 12 Stones is, and as affluent as that neighborhood is, you could drive through there and you got cars parked on the roadway and you couldn't get an engine through there. You can barely get my Altima through there sometimes.
One of you's gonna have to stop if you're gonna try to pass somebody.
Well, I do stop, but
Yeah.
sometimes they're parked on both sides.
Yeah. They either that or take out a Lexus, so, you better stop.
I don't have a Lexus, that's the chairman's car.
That's the chairman's car.
Now, whether you approve sidewalks or not, you can't anticipate what's going to happen down the road. And if sidewalks go in here on South Williams, there's nothing for it to go to, I understand. But what happens if another farm down there develops? You decide you want sidewalks. Well, now they're going to go to another property, and there's not sidewalks there. I'm not saying you got to have them, but somebody better decide and start going one way.
And in a case like that, what we're talking internally is we're exploring setting up impact fees, and it may actually include a sidewalk fund so that we have developers paying into a fund that when that connectivity that didn't happen today, yesterday, 10, 20 years ago, when we need that connectivity, then we have funding for that.
We don't want to drive up impact fees and
It's a balancing act.
building fees and all that to make people not want to develop property up here. You know, and plus, today's dollar going in for sidewalk 10 years from now won't even scratch the surface. So I'm not, I don't like government managing other people's money.
Mr. Bollinger?
One thing you have to remember about sidewalks also, when they go inside the right of way, and the right of ways are dedicated, the city takes them over. And that will be upkeep on the city, like you said. So the fund he's talking about, that's Metro does that, because if the city takes the sidewalks over, they'll be responsible for the upkeep and.
Just like the city will be when the road gets
Yeah, exactly. So
dedicated.
that's also.
Because there will be a performance bond, I assume, put up.
Until the improvements are completed and accepted by the city, there will be a performance bond in
And this
place if they want
performance
to
bond will be
record the
after
plat.
roads are finished.
It will convert to a maintenance bond, and generally that's for a year to assure the quality of the construction. It's at a reduced amount, obviously.
But your finished payment is done.
Correct.
Okay.
And then there is a defining moment where the developer is no longer responsible and the city takes ownership in that responsibility.
Now, another thing, if you do put sidewalks inside of it, you're talking curb, gutter, gonna be a whole lot more.
The curb and gutter is necessary in this project anyway because of the stormwater system that was designed for the subdivision.
It's on the backside.
It's already there. Yes, and that's another,
That's mandatory.
and we'll be addressing those obligations and responsibilities and the timing of those by the development agreement as we work towards the final plat. We'll get those details worked out, and while the planning commission may see those and may be able to make a recommendation to the city commission, it's an official contract between the city and the developer that at that point, the city commission will have to approve it and accept it.
It's an average size home. It's gonna be in here.
What's that?
Well, I mean, square footage, square
Price
footage.
points, probably, we're gonna try to be anywhere from 230 to 275, 285.
What square footage?
And square footage?
Probably anywhere from, I mean, we'll probably have a minimum of like 1,800 square foot.
Okay.
I mean, it's gonna be it's not gonna be a siding subdivision, it'll be brick.
Now, you were talking about this kind of fast track. Is there any way this could wait one more month
For what?
to approve?
What would be the purpose? If you don't, I'm not being disrespectful.
There's been a lot of questions raised,
Yes.
you know.
The questions will remain, whether they're answered this meeting or next meeting.
We have a motion and second on the table.
Yes.
However, that motion didn't address the variance requests.
Did you have a question, sir?
I was just wondering if I could speak to the matter,
Certainly.
if we have.
Mr. Chairman?
Your name is?
Cam Suggs.
That's right, Mr. Sam, you have the floor.
Cam.
Cam.
So,
Cam.
I'm a second generation developer. My dad developed Shenandoah subdivision, which is in Millersville, and he developed the rest of Sassafras Court, still owns property on Sassafras Court. My dad and his partner purchased the property on South Williams Road under the impression to be able to develop it. And that's where they went through the planning and zoning process in 2005, before they purchased the property, to make sure that everything got passed to be able to develop a subdivision, because that's what they did. They didn't want to buy a piece of property if it wasn't going to go through. The economy dropped as they were going through all the process to do it. My dad ended up getting sick. Then the economy fell. 2007, everybody knows what happened to the housing market. They pulled back on all their developments. They were developing in Gallatin, all over Middle Tennessee. They pulled back on all of them. When my dad got better, him and his partner met, decided it was time for them to retire. So they retired, and when they did, they started selling off all their developments. They sold the one in Gallatin to Halcom Homes. I went to them. I've been in the building business for 15 years. This will be my first development. And this is Jason's first development also, but this is something that we want to do. And I would want to do it in an area that I live in. And that's why we took on a real burden to buy this property. And so what we did is I told my dad then, before we buy this property, we want to make sure that everything is still in line with what was done in 2005, because there again, we don't want to buy the money, we don't want to spend the money to buy this property if we can't develop it. So we went through the process. I have a letter from White House Water that gave them availability for the subdivision. And then when I went to White House Water, they said, there's no availability. But they couldn't tell me that there had been any developments in this area. And just like he stated earlier, since like 2003 or before, there's been no developments in this area. So I feel like White House Water has held our feet to the fire. So I said, well, what can we do to be able to get water availability to this property? They came at us, they wanted us to put in a baffle tank box up by the interstate. They wanted us to upgrade the line from the interstate all the way there, all the way down Bethel Road. We've got prices on it because I was gonna do my due diligence on it, and it was over $800-something thousand, just a small part. And there's no way guys like us can afford that type of money. So we went back to them, negotiated. This went on for months. Met with Pat Kerr on them, and they said, we have upgraded our water lines from our water tower from White House all the way down to South Mount Pleasant Road. I want to make sure I say the names right. No, South Osborne. So coming down Mount Pleasant, they have they've upgraded, and that's the blue line that is here. And they said, and we've upgraded our line already from Bethel Road to Swift Road. If you will upgrade 2,500 feet from Swift Road all the way down and buy the easements from the people, go through the process of what y'all already heard, we'll give you water availability for your subdivision. And in the meeting, they said that, the fire chief that was here before was in on the meetings, and they came to the conclusion that there was enough for the pump tank to be able to get the natural flow out of the hydrant. And then they brought up, ridge tops right down the road. They've got the water tower, because actually in that curve, I found out that ridge tops, this water line that comes around by the racetrack, doesn't even run off of this line. It's on its own. It comes from a different area. And see, our property is here. Well, they wouldn't let us tie on to that area because David Love and them are doing the subdivision right here off of Living Good, and they've got all the water availability they need for their subdivision. So we did what we did. We said, okay, well, we'll do that. So we've had to get topos. I mean, we're in it so far now, there's no turning back, unless, it takes us under, really. Because we've gone on the fact of, my dad always taught me to be a man of your word. If you tell someone you're going to do something, then you stick by that. No matter what it costs you, you do what you say you're going to do. So all along this time, we've been having these meetings, and everybody is saying, yes, you can do it, this is going to work, so forth, so on. So in 2006, I've got letters from 2000. I've been working on this since 2014 is when we started purchasing the property. And I've got letters from them saying no hydrants, no sprinklers. So they went back to, and I didn't, but the city of Millersville went back, and I still have not received the minutes from the meeting in 2005 that I've asked for. And on the plat that my dad had, it says on the bottom, from the meeting, from the commissioners meeting, approved with widening of the road to 6 feet and not to have striped, to do away with the sidewalks. Well, so they typed up this and met with us. They had a draft, and we came here and met with them, and they made some changes, and they sent us the copy. And at that time, when they did that, that's when we were going to purchase the property, which was 12/5/2016, by the time we got everything squared away. So Joe Wall is my dad's partner, Mike Suggs is my dad. My dad signed it on 11/9/2016, which this is the stuff that was discussed in the 2005 meeting for the subdivision. So when we got this, the next week, we started the process of borrowing the money to say, yes, the subdivision is good, everything works out to where we can do what we need to do. We went through that process. Through surveying, something got mixed up with the property again. It put us on hold for 3 months. And that was something internal. So with that being said, I feel like we've gone over and beyond to try, like, just like the reason why, and I'm sure my dad's the same way, they did away with the sidewalks in the subdivision because there's no sidewalks anywhere. So they said, okay, well, if we're not gonna do sidewalks, we'll widen the road of the subdivision for you. We'll make it 24 feet instead of 20 foot. So they were willing to work with the commission at that time, and that's why they said, okay, no sidewalks. If y'all will widen the road to 24 feet, which was approved on this plat and signed by the commission on September 13, 2005, that we were gonna widen the road to do away with the sidewalks, and that's why this memorandum was made up by the city. And so when we got this letter, see, they wouldn't let us sign it. We were gonna try to sign it, but they wouldn't let us sign it. It had to be signed by the owners of the property that went through the planning and zoning, which is Joe Wall and Mike Suggs, my dad and his partner. So once they signed that binded that with the property, so then we were able to close on the property. Because it was saying, you've got everything that you need to build the homes that you need according to this plat right here. And since that time, we have actually widened the road. At the first original meeting, we were supposed to only put in a turning lane here at Bethel Road and widen it to the first entrance of Camden Circle now. It was Saratoga at the time. But now we have actually widen the road even more all the way, because they came to us and said, we would like for you to widen the road all the way past your subdivision. And we said, okay, we can do that. So we've gone, I feel like Jason and I have gone over and beyond. We're not guys that have a lot of money. We're guys that just that have good work ethic, that want to raise our kids right and provide for our families. And we want this subdivision to go through because my family lives in Millersville. I've got family. I don't live in Millersville. I live in Greenbrier, but I've got family that live in Millersville. And my dad did 2 developments up here, so I have some history in this area. I know a lot of people in this community. And I feel like if this subdivision would go through the way that it was, yeah, it doesn't meet all the requirements, but it's about, that's why I don't like dealing with Metro, because when you're dealing with cities like Greenbrier, whether it's Springfield or Millersville, you're dealing with the people that care about their community. I know y'all care about this community, or you wouldn't be on this board. So we care about this community, and we want to build the best home that's going to provide income for the families that live here, that's going to provide more tax money. We're doing a lot of off-site stuff just to be able to make this happen, and it's a struggle. But Jason and I have prayed about it for years. We prayed about it before we took the offer, and we felt like this was the next step, and to become a developer outside of building, to take that next step. And that's where we are tonight. Like I said, if there's anything that we say that we're going to do, we're going to do it. That's just the type of people we are. And I feel like we've been up front from the get-go, and we've been told a lot of stuff, and I want everybody to be on the same page to make this community a better place, and that's just is what it is. But I didn't want to sit back and not share the whole story of how this all went about. It got set on the table in 2005 because my dad got sick, and I've gone through all that. So there's a whole lot of history through this property. And I've got my best friend, that's my best man at my wedding, lives right across the street. His granddad grew up there. They're excited about it coming in. So there's a lot of people that are excited about the subdivision, and there's always going to be those people that aren't excited. But we're willing to work with you, and I'm sure Mr. Barr will tell you that from the beginning. Anything that we've told him that we're going to do, we've done it. And even if it's cost us money, like the upgrading the water line. So I would just appreciate it if we could just keep with what our first initial agreements were. And like I said, that was the whole reason why we went to go buy the property. So with that being said, if there's any questions for me or comments or concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Suggs. Appreciate it. We have a motion and we have a second. Are you ready for question?
I got one question.
Oh, yes, sir. Mr.
On
Smith.
this memorandum that you're talking about, you agreed to widen the lanes to 12 foot, but tonight you're asking to reduce it, correct? On South Williams.
Well, that was, I think that was something that Michael brought up to us, that they were seeing an issue with the right-of-way on the, is that not correct?
Actually, and I'll clarify that. In the early 2016 memorandum, that was before we had a comprehensive understanding of some of the roadway constraints, including the trees, and we discussed that amongst us and felt that it would be reasonable to reduce.
The trees are in the right-of-way.
They are in the right-of-way, yes, they are. However, a lot of people think, and it's not uncommon, a lot of people think that their property line ends at the asphalt. And in this case, those property owners that have those really nice trees along there, they
You're
think
not
they
telling
belong
us
to
that.
them. And I know, I mean, if you want to be legal about it, they belong to the public and the public can take them. We're trying to be sensitive to the neighbors up there.
For y'all.
Don't cut the trees.
I feel that's a reasonable compromise, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, but, well, you said compromise, we had 3 12-foot lanes, now we're gonna reduce to 2 9-foot.
No. Those 3 lanes
All the way to the end
will
of the
be,
subdivision.
will be 10 feet. Essentially, the 3 in total are losing 6 feet in total. But because of that reduction of the 6 feet in total, see, we have 3 lanes at Bethel Road, and then they taper down to 2 lanes at the first
But you
entrance
were
to the
gonna have a
subdivision.
turning lane all the way down, past the subdivision.
No, sir. No, it wasn't necessary.
It was never-
Because the turn lane is for stacking as cars come up to the stop sign and wait to take their turns. There's no reason to have a turning lane that long.
My mistake.
From here up.
You have a hand up in the back.
Yes, I recognize. The chair recognizes Mayor Lassiter.
I live at 1388 Williamson Road, and this subdivision don't affect me one bit. But I am the mayor of the city. I believe, in my opinion, this memorandum of understanding, when our city manager signed it, I believe she gave the word of the city. And I am a guy that likes to stand by any word that I give. I don't know if y'all have read this, but guilty or not, but if you read the last line, it says, by signature of this document, the parties agree to these terms, conditions, and allowances identified in this memorandum. If that's not giving the city's word, I don't know what it is. In 2005, the planning commission granted that subdivision with no sidewalks for one simple reason. Our minimum street width in that subdivision is 20 feet. If you want to see how that works, go over to North Town. The board in 2005 asked them to, rather than put sidewalks, to widen the street for safety, so the fire trucks could get in and out of that subdivision. So, like I said, I believe this binds the city. It might not legally, but morally, it binds the city. That's all it is.
Mr. Chairman, I have to go along with Mayor Lassiter's opinion on this. It may not bind the city legally, but ethically, I think it does. And I think, even from a legal standpoint, Mr. Wheeler can point out, it gives a real good cause of action by these developers because they've depended on it. And if I was representing those developers and trying to get this developed, I certainly would sue the city to try to recoup the money I've already put into this project, and then suddenly for this board to say that you can't do it. But they may be lost, may lose, but we would expend, they would expend a bunch of money and get it clarified in a court of law. And I'd like to avoid going to court if we can handle it here.
I heard you say that Mr. Love is not interested in what you're trying to do because he's got some more water pressure and he doesn't want to share it with you. I think you and Patrick ought to go put some pressure on him. That's my feeling. Because Patrick, I'm talking about the engineer at White House Utility. There he is with a mess. Cities have been criticized over the years for not keeping their sewer infrastructure up. And I don't know what White House Utility thinks is going on with the growth in White House and the growth in Millersville. They've got to see, I hope they see in their future plans, that there's a lot going on in this little valley. And so, you know, and when if the microphone was off and nobody was listening, I'd tell you to go over there on Love's property tonight after dark and start digging and hook into that line so you can have some water. I just said, I'm talking, I'm not saying to do it.
It's not a recommendation.
Look at him wincing over here. My point is, I'm terribly sympathetic. All right, enough conversation. Are you ready for a question?
Are we gonna leave this at
Mr.
22?
Chairman, I'm thinking that this board may be ready to make decisions on each of these 4 variances individually, if you would, please.
The motion wasn't on 4 variances. The
No,
motion
sir, it
was on
wasn't.
one. And as the author of the motion, I want to keep it the way it is.
Thank you. All right. All in favor of the motion as is presented, you want to repeat it?
Yeah, my motion was approval of the preliminary plats of the proposed Bethel Farm subdivision located on South Williams Road, Robertson County map 125, parcel 165.01, conditioned upon the city surveyor
And engineer.
and engineer giving final approval. What was it?
And does that motion include granting the 4 variances?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Secretary, would you make sure that's noted? Thank you.
I have a question on that, if you don't mind. If in doing that, would that eliminate, if there's no fire hydrant needed then?
Yes.
So you just eliminate the fire hydrants, and why even put it in the ground if you're not gonna do it?
Well, it's like this, you know, we do, that's the motion, and it has been seconded. But in answer to your question, if we, the way the motion stands, number one, if there are no fire hydrants there, and we say that they have to have fire hydrants there, they can't build. I mean, we might as well just say they can't. Let's be man enough and woman enough just to tell the developers, we're not gonna let you build there. Because White House has already said they're not gonna supply water, so therefore, it's obvious there's not gonna be fire hydrants there. So our decision, our choice is, are we gonna let them build there without fire hydrants? And that's the only choice we have. And that's a choice that's actually out of our hands and out of the developer's hands. So what do you want to do?
Okay, that's good. I can go along with that. I got a good definition,
Yeah.
but reducing the lane, how are we gonna reduce the lane? Have we reduced the lane, or have they gonna reduce the lane?
Well, according to what Mr. Barr said.
Their plans today include the reduced lane widths.
Yeah.
To at the
18
intersection
foot
of
at the
Bethel,
north end.
from 18 feet at the north end, all the way down to the 3 lanes at 30 feet in totality, 10
Yeah. So
10
you're-
feet each.
You've got 30 feet coming in from Bethel Road. I'm assuming one lane is for turning to the left, and one is for turning to the right.
Yes, sir.
And one is for entrance.
Yes.
And then after the first intersection.
And, well, actually, I believe it narrows down in about 200 to 300 feet.
Yeah.
To 10-foot lanes, to 2 10-foot lanes, to the first entrance of the subdivision, and then it tapers further down to 9-foot lanes.
To the last one.
Yes. Is that correct, Corey? I believe.
Look at the construction documents, I'm pretty sure that's accurate.
Okay.
Well, I just trying, like I said, I want to make sure I
I mean, that's the
know
way I
my-
understood it.
what I'm voting on, you know,
Yeah,
yea or nay. Yeah.
Well, I guess the biggest thing is, and I'm gonna tell you, I have a real concern about fire suppression and no fire hydrants there. I mean, that's my biggest concern. That's why I asked the question about how will it affect the entire city of Millersville? Will it affect, number one, I'm asking, is it gonna affect my fire rate where I live because of this subdivision?
I'd have to check.
I don't know if it would or wouldn't. I go back to looking at some of these other cities where they actually haven't, depending on like, well, for example, Hendersonville, you know, for a long time where they have that, up there where the old Sears building, Walmart, all that area back in there, You know, it was at a
Bonita
high.
Parkway.
Yeah, Bonita Parkway. It was at a higher rate than down there on the Walton Ferry, Saunders Ferry Peninsula because of the houses and there was no fire station at that time. And I remember when the fire station was built. So I do know that insurance companies or the people that do that, the underwriters, will break a city down. But that's a real concern I have. You know, and be honest with you, when I came in here, and that's why I didn't talk to Jason out in the parking lot and I know Jason, except talk about softball, because I see him at the ballpark, because that was a concern I had. And I wasn't sure about all the other, but I think everybody has told me tonight that this is something that is not the developer's fault, it's something that's not the city's fault, and I think it's patently unfair for them to be faced with this, and for us to be faced with this question. If the speakers weren't on,
Keep going.
I would say some other stuff, but it really bothers me quite a bit. But under the circumstances, you know, after y'all telling me what's going on, which is out of our hands, out of the developer's hands, out of everybody's hands here, you know, I'm gonna have to support it as it is, you know, and even without the sidewalks. And I think that's something that we need to take up in the work session. And I'm a big supporter of the sidewalks too.
I got a question for Mr. Bell. So the loop system you're voting, they don't even have to put in?
No, that's not what I said. That is not what I said. It has already been determined that the loop system is being placed in there. All the infrastructure for the fire hydrants is going in. They're building it. They're building it. They're doing every darn thing that is required.
I
except for the fire
understand. I
hydrants.
just want to be clear.
But no.
You know, with regard to, and I know I'm horning on your territory, but that's all right. With regard to fire protection, the question the insurance man's gonna ask you is, how close are you to a fire hydrant?
Yeah.
And is your fire station within 2 miles?
It's 2.2 miles from
2
South Williams to Bethel.
Yeah, they wanna know where the station is and where your hydrant is.
1 mile away.
And yes, we have a class 4, but that doesn't preclude them. Your individual underwriter may say, well, no, we're not gonna rate it a 4, we're gonna rate it a 6.
They may rate it a 6, yeah.
You know, we're gonna do, different things.
And if I can, you know, ISO, they don't put out the fires, water does.
They don't
So,
what?
they don't put out the fire, the water
That's-
does.
that's right.
So if we can't get hydrants and it won't support residential sprinklers, then we've got to find something, whether it's a tanker truck or something else to make sure that we get water there.
Well, I guess
I'm not gonna be able to
eventually-
sleep at night knowing that
Yeah.
I've got 53 more rooftops out there that I can't get adequate water.
Well, here's what bothers me even more so from everything I just said, is back in 2005, before the economy bottomed out, because I was in the title business, title and escrow company, and in '07 and '08, you know, when I did all of Tyree General Contractors closing. You know, Mr. Tyree and his whole family went out of business at the end of '07. At the end of '08, with all those garbage mortgages that were being put out, everybody went under. You know, I survived, but, you know, I saw a lot of people go by the wayside. And so, and I understand why nobody was developing back then. But in 2005, from my understanding, White House Utility told you there was enough water there for fire suppression. And now suddenly, 10 years later, 12 years later, there's not enough water out there? That makes absolutely no sense. Somebody's lying. They either lied in 2005 or they're lying in 2018.
Speaker's wrong.
That's fine. I mean, that's pretty obvious. Let's just talk about the obvious.
Well,
The
Mr.
obvious
Bell,
right now, huh?
And Mr. Bell, there may have been adequate water at the time, but in that course of 12 years, perhaps they've allocated that available water then to new customers and new areas now. That's the only thing I can throw out there. And it's not my job to defend White House Utility District.
Well, prior to 2005, Carl Shannon tried to build a subdivision right in front of Bethel Baptist Church, off in that holler. And water runs downhill real good, but he couldn't get a flow. He couldn't get his subdivision approved. And,
So maybe Mr. Love will add some loving.
well,
Maybe Mr. Love will add some loving to the situation.
I think some pressure needs to be put on Mr. Love. And I say that with all due respect. It's not like that Ridgetop's gonna be pulling on their fire hydrant at the same time Millersville's gonna be pulling on theirs. But if there is a major conflagration in that subdivision, we will be pulling on Ridgetop's the water supply.
Well, regarding Mr. Love and his properties and all that, my understanding is the water that he has available today is adequate for his facilities that he has today. There is not enough water for any expansions of his facilities in the pipe today. So
Well, I expect to hear that
he's
from White House
constrained.
Utilities.
It's my understanding from both White House and the Love partners.
They need to just get a rubber stamp and just stamp the application with that language on there for everything that comes in from Millersville. Not enough water. That way they don't have to keep repeating it, just be the easiest way to do it.
Gentlemen, and ladies, let's vote on this issue.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Vice Chairman insisted. We read the question. All right. We've got the motion and the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign.
No.
Let the record show that passed by almost unanimous, one vote shy. All right. Item 8, Development Services Department Report. Mr. Barr? Said none.
Actually, there's nothing to report for the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Planning and zoning activities.
Yes, planning and zoning activities. It's been a very busy last 4 or 5 weeks with some internal issues occurring. We've been able to accomplish and overcome a lot of the challenges that we've been faced lately. As far as planning and zoning activities go, what you're seeing here is a continuance of the positive motion, the activities of minor subdivisions, new homes coming in. The building department, which I'm assisting with now, is seeing some decent activities this spring with new home construction and additions and some other activities out there. We're encouraged by that. I will reiterate that the challenges with the West Bethel corridor continue. And as I mentioned earlier, there are a number of other projects that would like to happen, and we're working diligently to try and find a way to make them happen as much as the city can do. But again, our options are limited. We have a number of developers that continue to call through the city and inquire about different parcels. Some of them are keyed up and better ready to go than others, but we haven't seen really any substantial activity that I was hoping for that we would see. But we're still out there beating the bushes, still taking the phone calls, working with the folks from an economic development perspective. Our relationships within the community and to the region and to the state are as healthy as they have ever been. We get an employer in that's creating new jobs or bringing new jobs to Tennessee from out of state. We're geared up to handle them as long as they're not in the northwest quadrant. We're working through some city projects that you've seen in the past. They're moving forward. Unfortunately, I don't have anything exciting to report to you, but that we continue on, continuing on.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. Item 9, Commissioner comment and general discussion. Mr. Lee. Mr. Gregory.
No, sir, thank you.
Mr.
I appreciate everything you do, Mr. Barr. I know it's a hard task, and I know I sound like I'm attacking you, but I'm not.
Oh, no, sir.
I don't.
No, and I appreciate your vigor and manner in this. I respect that how you interact with us is really helpful for this board and the community. And thank you for that.
But I appreciate all the hard
I don't
work
take
you
offense
do.
at all.
Okay. Great job.
Mr. Chairman, I do have something real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Throw me that highlighter. Thank you. Close enough.
Brent, you got anything?
Sir.
Mr. Pettit, you have anything? No. Oh, I'm sorry, ladies first. Ms. Wade, do you have anything?
No, not at this time.
No, sir. All right. I would like to go back to the song I've been singing ever since 1981, and that is that, I don't know, Mr. Mayor, how the tax flow's going. I don't know what the budget looks like. I know we need more room in City Hall, but maybe we ought to get down and dirty on a infrastructure improvement bond letting.
For the water?
For the water. And the city get repaid out of the proceeds. We've been talking about this, nobody ever does anything about it, but it's a viable option if we can get the right people to work on it. I think,
I'll have her put it on the next work session.
I think that, we accomplished a lot with our sewer system. Back in the day, we did bonds, floated bonds, and paid them back, and actually paid them ahead of schedule. But, so, it seems to me, Mr. Barr, that that would be a worthwhile endeavor, and then you could finally be able to tell us that something's coming instead of we're trying to get something because nobody's got any water.
If I may comment on that.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, the challenge is identifying adequate repayment debt service on that bond.
I understand.
And bottom line is, we can borrow money all day long, but unless we have an income stream and that revenue source to support that loan, we're still stuck in where we are.
I don't have water at my house tonight, and neither does Mr. Gregory.
I'm done, I'm dry.
He doesn't have it.
You don't have any water?
And then you were having this meeting, so you turned our water off.
They were watching.
Well, I guess it's that old riddle of the field of dreams, build the field and the people will come. And if we have something to offer, we might get some more takers.
And if we don't, then the rest of the community, the taxpayers, are on the hook for that debt service.
I understand. It has to
I-
be well-planned and well thought out.
And
Which you can do.
I'm trying.
He was just trying to take it easy on you a while ago, and then to add that to you.
All right.
We're going to compliment him, then ask him to do the impossible.
Yeah, and then give me more.
Yeah, and here's the dagger.
Cam, you got anything you want to say now? You got 3 minutes, and that's all.
Forever hold your
I
peace.
appreciate y'all's time and the vote.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Next planning commission meeting is April the 10th, 2018. April the 10th, 2018. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Mr. Petty, Mr. Aldridge.